Years of work, silent devotion, invisible labor. And then, with deliberate calm, he erased every trace of their shared life. Her shock was immediate, her horror palpable. Would she finally understand what she'd lost, or was it too late? Eric Collins stood in the grand ballroom of the centuries-old mansion, the walls lined with towering Corinthian columns, and the ceiling adorned with crystal chandeliers that scattered light across polished marble floors. The air was filled with the quiet hum of conversations, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the subtle rustle of tailored suits and evening gowns. Around him, physicians and researchers discussed recent breakthroughs, grant opportunities, and potential collaborations with pharmaceutical companies, their voices carrying a tone of ambition and quiet competitiveness. Eric's face bore a practiced smile, polite and attentive, but beneath it his chest felt heavy, as if the air itself pressed down on him, compressing each breath. He had spent the last 4 years working relentless shifts on the port construction sites, long nights filled with drilling, welding, and heavy lifting, sacrificing holidays, birthdays, even the small comforts of life, all to ensure his wife, Elise, had the tools, space, and time she needed to pursue her medical residency. He remembered the nights when she returned exhausted from clinical rotations, her hands shaking, her eyes red and tired, and he held her in the quiet darkness of their apartment until her sobs subsided, until her body ceased trembling. Every step he had taken, every drop of sweat, every sore muscle had been for her, for the life they were building together. Yet now, as he observed her standing near the center of the room, radiant in her crisp white coat, her posture straight and composed, her expression reserved and distant, he felt an unsettling alienation. She moved among colleagues with ease and grace, laughing lightly at comments and exchanging professional pleasantries. But when her gaze met his, it was distant, detached, a polite acknowledgement rather than the warmth he had known in the quiet of their home. The room, with its grandeur, the soft gleam of candlelight, the perfumed air mingling with the scent of polished wood and leather-bound books, seemed suddenly foreign, a stage where he no longer belonged. Every laugh around him, every handshake and congratulatory nod, reminded him of the widening gap between the sacrifices he had made and the coldness of the acknowledgement he received in return. The illusion of success, the careful construction of a life meant to secure her achievements and their shared dreams, now felt brittle, almost surreal, as if the walls themselves could not contain the tension between outward appearances and the unspoken truths of their private world. Eric felt the weight of years compressing on him in that moment, a quiet reckoning with the invisible debt of effort and devotion, the unseen cost of ensuring someone else's rise while remaining shadowed and unrecognized. The chandeliers shimmered above, the soft murmur of conversation continued, yet he stood frozen, a solitary figure amid the glamour, aware that the life he had built for another had begun to reveal the subtle fracture lines of its foundation, and that the image of success surrounding him was perhaps no more than a carefully maintained illusion. After the formal portion of the Medical Association gathering, Eric Collins stepped out into the damp streets of New Orleans, the night air sharp and bracing against his skin, carrying the distant echo of jazz and the faint scent of river water mixed with wet asphalt. Each inhale seemed to strip him of something, leaving an internal emptiness that weighed heavier than any physical burden he had endured on the construction sites. He had known for weeks that decisive action was required, that the quiet patience he had maintained in the background of his wife's life had reached its limit. The city lights flickered along the French Quarter streets as he walked, a solitary figure moving deliberately, carrying the invisible weight of preparation, of plans meticulously drawn over sleepless nights and long hours of reflection. In the privacy of their shared home, he began the painstaking process of removing every trace of their life together, a methodical dismantling that was both practical and symbolic. Furniture was shifted, sold, or donated. Each piece he removed a statement of boundaries and consequences, the familiar warmth of their shared surroundings stripped away with quiet precision. He distributed financial accounts, credit cards, and access to savings in a way that left Elise with no control, no hidden fallback, forcing her into a confrontation with the consequences of her own detachment. Each action was calculated, executed slowly, without haste, as though he were conducting an intricate experiment in human awareness and morality. He observed the minutiae, noting every hesitation, every glance, every unspoken response, attempting to measure her understanding of what he had given, what he had endured, and what she had failed to recognize. His movements through the house, the shifting of objects, the systematic closing of doors and the sealing of drawers, carried a rhythm that was both deliberate and ritualistic, a silent choreography meant to reveal truths that words could not convey. He understood that the world they had shared, the domestic stability and the veneer of marital partnership, had been illusory in many ways, built upon assumptions of loyalty and gratitude that had not been reciprocated. In that quiet, deliberate dismantling, Eric found a strange clarity. The removal of comforts and the stripping away of normalcy was not cruelty but revelation. The night outside pressed against the windows and doors, cool wind curling around corners and through the lattice of iron railings, and inside, each emptying space reflected a growing truth that had always lingered unspoken between them. That the foundation of their life together had been uneven. That one person had carried the weight of another's ambitions without acknowledgement. And that now, in the silence of an emptied home, those imbalances could no longer be ignored. Elise had always believed her life to be carefully structured, a delicate balance of professional achievement and personal comfort. Her residency at one of the city's most prestigious hospitals gave her recognition among peers and respect from professors. Her days mapped out in rotations, research, and patient care. Each moment meticulously planned to reinforce the sense of stability she carried like armor. Returning home one evening, the familiar rhythm of her life shattered instantly. The apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet routines and subtle domestic familiarity, stood empty and silent. Furniture that had grounded her in routine was gone, along with small personal touches she had never considered essential but which, in their absence, made the space feel hollow and uninhabitable. Drawers were bare, faucets stripped of clothing, countertops cleared of the objects she had touched daily without notice, as though the entire history of shared life had been erased overnight. Among the empty spaces lay stacks of official documents, neatly arranged yet menacing, announcing divorce proceedings she had not anticipated and final settlements she had no power to alter. Her attempts to access bank accounts were met with the cold, impersonal refusal of financial institutions. Passwords and cards she had thought secure were deactivated, balances frozen, leaving her with only a minimal allowance, just enough to survive day to day. Each line of text, each number on the screen, carried an almost physical weight, a revelation that the savings, the investments, and the assets she had assumed as shared were under Eric's sole control. A sense of betrayal layered over the initial shock, each heartbeat echoing the realization that her years of tireless work, the nights she spent on research papers, the energy she had poured into her career, had been scaffolded entirely upon sacrifices she had not recognized. The world she thought was secure, the meticulously ordered life, the predictable rhythms, the validation from colleagues and mentors, collapsed into a stark landscape of disorientation. Her mind raced to comprehend the implications, the absence of familiar objects and financial autonomy translating into a terrifying awareness that her independence had been an illusion. The emotional impact was immediate and visceral, a mixture of guilt for failing to see the depth of Eric's contributions, confusion over how she had overlooked the uneven foundation of their life, and despair at the sudden exposure of vulnerability. Each document she read, each line confirming her lack of access, amplified the sensation that the life she had assumed under control was in truth a carefully curated projection, fragile and contingent, dependent on someone else's patience, labor, and restraint. The silence of the apartment became oppressive, the emptiness echoing her thoughts, and in that space, she confronted the full magnitude of her misjudgment, the sharp reality that comfort and recognition could not substitute for awareness, gratitude, or true understanding of the sacrifices that had made them possible. Elise sank into a quiet, hollowed state, the emotional shock of recent events spreading through her like a slow, relentless tide. The accomplishments she had once counted as pillars of her identity, the accolades from professors, the recognition of peers, the meticulous progress through her medical residency, now felt hollow and unmoored, stripped of meaning by the sudden exposure of a reality she had ignored. Every compliment, Every nod of approval she had received at conferences or in hospital corridors now rang with a hollow resonance, reminders not of her own worth, but of the illusions that had been carefully constructed around her. In that empty apartment, surrounded by bare walls and the absence of shared life, she confronted the stark truth that real value in a human being could not be measured in status, achievement, or outward success. Fidelity, honesty, the quiet, often invisible acts of sacrifice that supported those around them. These were the measures that mattered, the currencies of genuine human connection that she had failed to see. The facade she had relied on for reassurance, social respectability, professional validation, the sense of a life controlled and secure, crumbled like fragile plaster, revealing the emptiness beneath. Each document from Eric, each formal letter, each financial statement she could barely comprehend pressed upon her consciousness, punctuating the absence of trust and recognition she had assumed would be automatic. The sudden confrontation with this truth left her mind spinning, an endless cycle of reflection and guilt, as she traced her ignorance through years of reliance on another's unacknowledged labor. She had lived within a construct that appeared stable, yet in its core it had depended entirely on the unseen and unspoken contributions of someone she had taken for granted. The awareness struck her with a physical weight, a pressing ache behind the eyes and a hollowing in the chest that no professional success could fill. Every memory she had of her career now carried the shadow of oversight and self-centeredness. Every moment she had felt proud of achievement now mingled with shame for her failure to perceive the real human cost behind it. The apartment, stripped bare, became a mirror of this internal void, amplifying the sense of isolation and urgency to reevaluate her priorities. She realized she must confront the uncomfortable truth that ambition and recognition were meaningless without empathy, loyalty, and the capacity to see and honor the sacrifices that made her life possible. In that oppressive quiet, she was forced to reckon not only with the practical consequences of Eric's actions, but with the moral and emotional truths that had been obscured by years of convenience and assumption. Her world, which had once seemed structured, predictable, and under her control, revealed itself as fragile and contingent, built upon the generosity and endurance of another person. And in that revelation, the collapse of illusions brought a painful clarity she could neither escape nor deny. Eric observed the unfolding consequences of his decisions with a calm, measured detachment, aware that the changes he had imposed were harsh yet necessary to reveal truths that had long gone unacknowledged. He ensured Elise had just enough financial support to survive, a minimalist allowance that kept her alive but dependent, deliberately withholding abundance, not out of malice, but as a framework of boundaries and an unspoken test of comprehension and appreciation. From a distance, he watched the ripple effects of his actions shape her world, noting how the routines and privileges she had relied on for comfort had vanished, leaving her exposed to the reality of self-reliance and the weight of decisions previously made by another for her benefit. Elise was forced to confront the stark absence of familiar supports. No steady material cushion, no implicit safety net, no social and professional status she had assumed would remain unquestioned. The world she had believed to be stable was now fragile, and with that fragility came an unavoidable confrontation with her own priorities, assumptions, and values. Gradually, through the strain of adapting to limitations and navigating new uncertainties, she began to reassess the foundations of her life, evaluating ambitions, education, and career milestones not as mere markers of personal success, but as elements intertwined with human relationships, loyalty, and the quiet, often invisible sacrifices of those who cared for her well-being. The achievements she had once counted as the pinnacle of accomplishment now revealed themselves as superficial. The glittering recognition from colleagues and professors diminished in significance against the deeper metrics of trust, respect, and devotion. Every small challenge she encountered, the need to budget carefully, to solve problems independently, to seek practical solutions without relying on familiar scaffolds, forced her to internalize lessons about empathy, gratitude, and emotional intelligence. In the absence of material abundance and social validation, she discovered a subtler, yet far more enduring measure of value: the capacity to recognize, honor, and reciprocate commitment and care in relationships. The realization grew slowly, like a pulse beneath the surface, that true esteem and genuine affection were never derived from accolades, financial security, or outward success, but from a network of mutual trust and support, the unspoken covenant that binds people who truly understand and respect one another. Eric, watching the transformation, felt neither triumph nor vindication. He merely observed, knowing that the trial he had imposed had fulfilled its purpose, revealing the layers of dependence and entitlement, and offering Elise the opportunity to perceive the human dimensions of respect, loyalty, and love beyond the superficial glitter of achievement. Each day she navigated the new reality. Each small victory in self-sufficiency reinforced a hard-earned understanding that life measured by appearances and external validation was transient, while life grounded in integrity, empathy, and reciprocal care had enduring value. A truth that no degree, no accolade, and no recognition could substitute. After the months of upheaval and confrontation with her own misconceptions, Elise began the painstaking process of reconstructing her life from the ground up. She moved into a modest apartment, stripped bare of unnecessary adornments, where every object she chose to keep or acquire reflected intention and necessity rather than habit or comfort imposed by others. Each day was measured, carefully planned, from budgeting for groceries to arranging her schedule to balance work, study, and moments of reflection. The simplicity of her surroundings mirrored the clarity she was beginning to cultivate internally, a sense that life could be rich in meaning without reliance on material abundance or social prestige. Her career, once built upon external validation and structured routines, now advanced slowly and deliberately, each achievement earned through personal effort and deliberate choice. Small victories, a completed research paper, a successful patient case, a well-managed budget, became milestones of self-reliance, each reinforcing her awareness of the value inherent in personal accountability and deliberate action. Meanwhile, Eric continued his work on construction projects along the Gulf Coast, overseeing investments and managing developments with the same meticulous care he had always applied, but now without the silent burden of proving his worth to anyone. He operated in a quiet equilibrium, the satisfaction of competence and ethical diligence no longer dependent on acknowledgement or gratitude. Both of them navigated their separate paths with newfound clarity. Elise learned to recognize and cherish loyalty, sincerity, and the quiet sacrifices of those around her, understanding that respect and affection could not be purchased or assumed. Eric, in observing the evolution of his former partner, confirmed his belief that love and value are manifested not through financial provision or material generosity, but through trust, honesty, and the recognition of humanity in another person. Time passed with a rhythm that was steady and measured, each day layering understanding over past experience, each choice and action reinforcing the lessons carved out of loss, misjudgment, and revelation. Though their paths diverged, the imprint of these experiences remained indelible. Elise carried forward the wisdom of discernment, the patience to value human connection over status, and the awareness that achievement alone is hollow without empathy and recognition of others' contributions. Eric continued with his own endeavors, tempered by the quiet satisfaction that comes from integrity and the knowledge that true care requires neither reward nor acknowledgement. Life moved forward for both, not in grandeur or spectacle, but in deliberate steps of understanding, reflection, and measured growth, each aware that the truths they had learned, the meaning of loyalty, sincerity, and genuine human value, would accompany them indefinitely, shaping their choices, their relationships, and the way they measured success for the rest of their days.